So it is the Thursday before build day, and everything has come in except for the case, which I'm a little bit nervous about because we want to build on Saturday. That's just when it works out best for everybody's schedules, but the case isn't supposed to come in until Saturday, and it says by like 10 p.m. So I'm a little bit worried that it might not get here until late and we won't be able to build, but I'm really hoping that it gets in on time. If not, I think we'll have to build on Sunday without Tristan, which would be terrible because we're kind of really heavily relying on Tristan for this project. So yeah, fingers crossed. The case came in. This is great news. We get to build today. Mango is also very excited. But yeah, the case came in on time. Actually early, so we are good to go. We're building.
I'd be like, make sure he's plus.
All right, the gang is all here. We've got Richard and Addison.
Also known as Stone Malone 11.
And Tristan and Rachel here.
Football owner.
And this is
No.
And Rachel, what's your screen name?
I do not game.
All right.
So,
Girls' night.
girls' night. Saturdays for the girls.
So first things first is we had to get the case out of the box that it came in, which proved to be a harder task than we would have anticipated. The styrofoam was really tight in the box and it was just really hard to get out. We had to cut the box open. It was kind of funny. The case that I went with is a Corsair white RGB case with 3 pre-installed fans. I really like the design on this case, and it has an open glass side panel, so you can see the inside RGB, which is really cool. The price was very reasonable, and the case would come in by Saturday, so we could build on time. After getting 3 sets of hands and a knife involved, we finally got the case open. The next thing we did was open up the power supply. This will be used throughout our build process to ground ourselves so that we don't have any built-up static that could be transferred into the motherboard. I don't know the exact science behind it, but it's supposed to help protect your PC components from getting fried or something. Once we set up our grounding system, it was time to break out the motherboard. To help minimize the static around the motherboard, we worked on top of the box that it came in. The CPU that I got is the Intel i5-12400. It is a 6-core, 12-thread, 4.4 GHz max turbo frequency CPU. Despite everybody telling me how horrible it is when you install the CPU, I was still really nervous doing it. It literally sounds like you're breaking the motherboard, breaking the CPU. It sounds like the PC components that you just spent hundreds of dollars on are cracking underneath your fingers. It's scary, but fortunately all of those sounds are normal, and we successfully installed my CPU. Quick shout out to the magnetic screwdriver set that Tristan got me as a Secret Santa present. The next thing we did was install the solid-state drive. This is one of the easier parts of the build process in my opinion, and when the solid-state drive clicks into place, it's honestly pretty satisfying. Once we got the SSD screwed into place, we then installed the CPU cooler. Or we tried to. Let me tell you about the first issue that we ran into. See that gray stuff on the CPU cooler? Right in the center? That's thermal paste. My CPU cooler came with pre-installed thermal paste, which is very convenient as it saves us the trouble of having to put it on there ourselves and most likely making any kind of mistakes. As such, Tristan, Addison, and Richard all told me to be really careful while handling the CPU cooler and to not place it thermal paste side down. Despite this, I forgot, and while we were deliberating how to install the CPU cooler, I accidentally almost put it down thermal paste side down, and everyone freaked out. So here's the audio outtake from that because it's pretty funny. So we gotta take off, if it's facing this way, we need to take
No!
Jesus Christ, what?
That can't
I'm
touch
sorry,
the...
I'm
Although to be honest, the screws probably would have saved it.
Okay, we all like freaked out. We were like,
You saw me doing it for so long. I don't know why-
that was less. That was half a second.
Screws
So long.
Definitely would have saved it.
Okay,
No,
thank.
it's fine. Okay.
So yeah, fortunately Richard was right, and the little screws in the back of the cooler did save the error from being disastrous. But yeah, just a funny moment during the PC building that gave us all anxiety. The second issue we ran into while installing the CPU cooler was none of us knew how to install it. We watched quite a few videos and tried several different ways of going about this. It ended up taking us almost an hour because we were so confused and unsure of what we were doing. We had to push those little pins through the motherboard, which kept causing the motherboard to bend a ridiculous amount, and it was really concerning. Also, even when we pushed the pins through, they didn't seem to stay in place. It was just very confusing and weird, and eventually Tristan just kind of figured it out. To celebrate the successful CPU cooler installation, we took several shots of thumbs up for your viewing pleasure. Remember how I said that the SSD was one of the easiest things to install? Well, after getting the CPU cooler installed, we realized the SSD was in the wrong spot. You'll see that we're moving the SSD to where there was this little armor plate installed on the motherboard. That's M.2 armor, which is where the motherboard manual said to install the SSD. So we moved it there so that it would be in the ideal placement. The next thing we did was install the RAM, which actually is the easiest part of building a PC. Those little guys just click right into place. They make a nice little clicky sound, and it is a pretty satisfying feeling. If only all of PC building was clicking things satisfyingly into place. After we installed the RAM, we plugged the CPU cooler into the motherboard. The next thing we did was prep the case for motherboard installation by doing some cable management. This was basically a problem-solving session to determine what is the best port to put this cable through on the case so that it has the path of least resistance to the appropriate corresponding port on the motherboard. Once we got the cable management and the case figured out, it was time to install the motherboard. This part is pretty simple. We basically dropped the motherboard down into the case and screwed it in. The screws that you use to install the motherboard are really tiny, and with all that's going on the motherboard, it's hard to get your hands down in there and get the screwdriver and the screw in place, so it was super helpful to have the magnetic screwdriver for this portion of the build. Another helpful thing would be to not have long-ass acrylic nails at the time that you're building your PC, but in my defense, when I got them put on, I did not know that I was going to be building a PC in 2 weeks. Here's a close-up of the motherboard installed in the case, and a close-up of a proud PC owner-to-be mid-build. From there, we did some more cable management, plugged everything into the motherboard that was already in the PC, and installed another fan that would act as the outflow for my PC's cooling system. The next thing we did was install the power supply. This was a little bit tricky because the drive tray was very much in the way of the ginormous cables that are associated with the power supply. We ended up having to take the drive tray out so that we could get the power supply and its ginormous cables in there, and then put the drive tray back in and do backwards cable management from there. Once that was figured out, we screwed the power supply into place and did a bit more tidying up with our cable management inside the case. The next step of the build process was to install the GPU. The GPU is actually a bit of a funny story. Once I decided that I really wanted to go all in and actually build a PC, I started entering Newegg shuffles for GPUs per Tristan's advice. If you're not familiar, Newegg shuffles are raffles every day for the chance to win an opportunity to buy a near market value PC component, whether that's a GPU, motherboard, CPU, etc. I had been entering them for about a week, and one evening, Tristan told me that he had entered for a 3070 and actually won. I only had a few hours to decide if I wanted to buy the GPU or not, but given that I didn't know when an opportunity like this would come again, considering how insane the market is right now, I decided to take it. I bought the GPU that night, and it was actually bundled with the power supply. So the power supply that I got was also included in the Newegg shuffle, and I got both of those right off the bat. The installation of the GPU was pretty straightforward. It is huge, so it took up a lot of space, which made us a little bit nervous at first, but we managed to get it in there. Since the GPU is so big and heavy, it can actually sag due to its own weight. To counteract that, we did two things. The first was that we ran the GPU cables above it through the top to counterbalance any sag that would be pulling it down. The second was that we installed a little GPU shelf that came with my case, so that actually went right below the GPU to help hold it up. Once we got the GPU installed, we were done building. So here's a brief kitty interlude before we show the final reveal, the moment of truth. We were going to turn the PC on, or at least try to. If we attempted to turn the PC on and the lights didn't come on, that is a pretty good indication that you've done something wrong, and we would have to open everything back up and try to troubleshoot what went wrong. So here's the moment of truth.
Do we want to turn lights up?
Just keep it on right here. No, keep the lights
We're gonna
on.
jinx it that it's not gonna turn on.
It did
Well,
turn
that's-
on.
no,
I
that's-
plugged it in and turned it on.
I know, that's not the power switch though.
That's just to turn on the power
the
supply.
ambient light on the
Well, I mean, at least something turned on. So.
Wait, so do we want to turn lights off for this?
No.
Nah.
Okay.
Can you see it? Okay.
But yeah, also it'll be doesn't turn on, so that'll be a good shot too, regardless. All right. So turning that on, and then. Oh wait! Oh, it did turn on, but. Oh, there we go.
Shit. Wow, it's really pretty. Oh yeah. It's so pretty. Holy shit. Oh my god. So the PC turned on. As far as we could tell, we had done everything right. The next step was to hook the PC up to a monitor and install the operating system and a bunch of other techie stuff that I don't quite understand. Tristan pretty much took the reins on this part. Also, big shout out to my friend Evan for giving me a license for Microsoft so that I could have an operating system. When all was said and done, the build took about 4 to 5 hours. I truly could not have done any of this without Tristan, Addison, and Richard helping me through it. They showed me resources to help me understand how to build a PC. They helped me pick out parts. And of course, they spent their whole Saturday night at girls' night with me building my PC. A big shout out to Rachel, too, for hanging out with us and being comedic relief throughout the night. The whole experience was stressful, fun, scary, and wholesome all at once somehow. But enough from me. Here are our final thoughts.
This video was sponsored by White Claw.
True.
Make sure that you don't buy White Claws because they're too expensive.
Final thoughts. We finished the job.
It was shocking that it actually turned on, but I'm happy it did.
It was very smooth.
It was an experience that we had.
I'm a fan of the white.
It was fun
Why
Plus.
not?
and stressful at times, but we got through it. There were a lot of questionable clicks and noises.
And bending of motherboard.
Yeah.
The motherboard was 90 degrees.
We were all cave people trying to comprehend Intel's new way of installing
A
CPU
cooler.
coolers.
Yeah. That was really something.
Their stock cooler.
All right. Thanks, friends.
Woo!
Girls' night.
Girls' night.
Girls' night.
And girls' night.